What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Show, where I, Graham G. Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network and on Peacock. And today we're talking the March 5th, 2022 edition of Talking Smack. As always, being hosted by Jackie Redmond, Matt Camp, and their special guest for this week, Jerry the King Lawler. Usually my least favorite host on these shows, but there was this one great moment from later. I'll talk about it later, but there was this joke that he made that went completely over Jackie's head, and Matt Camp's reaction was priceless. So, again, Jerry Lawler, typically not my favorite on these sort of shows, but there was one great moment that made it worthwhile. So to start off the show, they recapped Ricochet's Intercontinental Championship win from Friday's SmackDown, beating Sami Zayn with the help of Johnny Knoxville. Before they run down the other biggest headlines from the show, including Naomi and Sasha Banks continuing to maintain momentum, and Ronda Rousey making her in-ring singles debut on SmackDown on Friday. They go back to Ricochet backstage, recap the match, show the finish to the matchup from Friday. And we see Ricochet backstage at the show with Megan Morant. And he tells Megan Morant that he feels amazing as the new Intercontinental Champion. It's a culmination of all of his hard work, and the fact that Johnny Knoxville played a factor in his championship win was cool to him because he grew up watching him, not idolizing him probably, but doing stupid stuff like Johnny Knoxville would do in the Jackass movies, which is pretty great. He's ready to take the Sami Zayn plates off of the Intercontinental Championship belt, and he saw that Johnny Knoxville music, him walking down to the ring to distract Sami as an opportunity, and he took advantage of it. Back in the studio, Jerry Lawler says that that Ricochet, he's a bit upset that Ricochet is calling himself the King. How many other people can call themselves the King? And, Jerry was calling himself the King before Ricochet was even fucking born, probably. But, Ricochet's been going as the King Ricochet moniker on Twitter for quite a while, so I wouldn't get too upset at him over that. But he does recall Andy Kaufman getting in the ring with him many, many years ago, and it not exactly ending well for Andy Kaufman, so he doesn't think Johnny Knoxville will be much different come WrestleMania. Jackie Redmond says he could be a bit of a wild card. We haven't seen too much of Johnny Knoxville in the ring. We don't know too much of what to expect, which is true, although we did see him in the Rumble, back at the Royal Rumble match in January. And Jerry Lawler says, listen, I've seen every Jackass movie, which I doubt personally. I can't say I can envision Jerry Lawler sitting on the couch or going to a movie theater to purchase a ticket to see fucking Jackass, but maybe he has. He does think, he admires his tenacity, the tenacity of Johnny Knoxville. He thinks he'll survive a WrestleMania, but not necessarily win. They talk about Brock Lesnar defending the WWE Championship at this point last night, but at this point, at the time this was recorded and aired on Peacock, it was that night, Saturday. The WWE Championship at Madison Square Garden, which I won't talk too much about here, but, they mention how could Lesnar, Lawler says, how could Lesnar get in a position where he doesn't even know who his opponent is on this show? Like, he should probably have someone like a Paul Heyman in his corner to have this legal representation to figure out how does he not know his opponent going into that show, especially this close to WrestleMania. But Matt Camp says that he's probably looking at this as a warm-up before he gets to the so-called biggest WrestleMania match of all time, the unification match for the WWE and Universal Championship match, for the WWE and Universal Championships at WrestleMania 38 in Texas. They replay the Austin Theory-Pat McAfee interaction that confirmed that we are getting Pat McAfee against Austin Theory at WrestleMania. Matt Camp says, listen, it's a good spot for McAfee to be in. He's facing a young up-and-comer, and he's probably lying when he says he's not physically ready. He can get physically ready. He's just, what was the word that he used? He's sandbagging, Austin Theory, Matt Camp said. And he also recalls the fact that he has had in-ring experience. He didn't say this exactly, but he did face Adam Cole back at TakeOver 30, and he was in a War Games match back in December of 2020. So it's not like he's never been in the ring before, a lot like, a Logan Paul or a Johnny. Logan Paul has in a different way, not in a WWE ring in a match. And Knoxville only wrestled for like 30 seconds of the Rumble. But anyway, they replay the Roman Reigns promo from SmackDown that addressed Brock Lesnar in the MSG match from last night, before recapping the Usos versus Viking Raiders for the SmackDown Tag Team titles. Good match. The Usos won, retaining the championships. Jackie Redmond questions if they can even be beat. And Matt Camp says that the Usos have been around long enough to know what WrestleMania season means, and they will be tough to beat, and he doesn't know who is going to be able to step up and take those titles from them. They kind of say the same things when Megan Morant interviews them backstage, the Usos, still the SmackDown Tag Team Champions, and he mentions, or one of the Usos, I think it was Jay, mentions, yeah, you said that they took us to our limit, but at the end of the day, who are the ones cashing the checks, making the money, and holding on to the gold? It's the Usos. And they kind of put everyone on notice, and that was it. So a very brief interview backstage with the Usos. Matt Camp plays up Roman Reigns' WrestleMania accomplishments. He has walked in and out, or maybe not, yeah, he has walked in and out as WWE Universal Champion before. And, Brock's trying to play mind games, but Roman is having none of it. And no one has been able to touch him since he became champion back in August of 2020. And he may be able to exercise those past WrestleMania demons if he can beat someone as dominant as Brock Lesnar come Mania 38. They then recap Ronda Rousey versus Sonia Deville in the main event of SmackDown from Friday that saw, obviously, Ronda Rousey go over decisively and quickly. They recap Naomi versus Carmella as well. Naomi picked up the win there in about 2 minutes. We hear backstage with Megan Morant, Team Glow Bad, or whatever they're calling themselves now, Team Bads, Sasha Banks, and Naomi. I think this is the first we've heard from Sasha in quite a while. We didn't hear from her, I don't think, on SmackDown this week, not on SmackDown last week. Even when she returned back in January, I don't think we heard from her. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's how it's played out. But Banks says that it's Boss and Glow time right now, and Naomi says that a lot has changed in their respective careers since they were last linked up. And that's why Banks vows to win the SmackDown, or the WWE rather, Women's Tag Team titles at WrestleMania. So then Jerry Lawler makes this really weird comment that's, in character for Jerry, I guess. But they were talking about the Naomi and Carmella match. This wasn't the comment that I was laughing about earlier, by the way. That's something else in a moment. But, he was like, oh yeah, you guys are talking about Naomi and Sasha now. You can't keep your eyes off Naomi. She's great. But he goes, I couldn't keep my eyes off of Carmella. And I'm thinking, oh, great, he's going to call her hot or something, make some sort of, sexist, not sexist joke, but do one of those typical Jerry Lawler things where he's, swooning over Carmella. I guess Corey Graves, when he does it, at least is okay because he's married or going to be married to her. Although he did that with other women in the past that he wasn't dating, so I don't know exactly what to think of that, like Eva Marie, for example. But no, he doesn't say that. Jerry Lawler doesn't. He actually says, she calls herself, Carmella does, the most beautiful woman in all of WWE. That's what Corey Graves says on commentary every week. But then I question, is Corey Graves putting two contacts in the same eye? And, basically saying that she's not. Listen, obviously, I don't know, arguably she is the most beautiful woman in all of WWE. And he's like, oh, what is Corey talking about when he says that? It wasn't like he was really overly dissing Carmella's looks, and I'm kind of looking a little bit too much into it. But he was basically referencing that she was ugly, and he didn't say the words ugly, but he was kind of like, how could she even be close to be considered the most beautiful woman in all of WWE? I don't know if anyone really debates that, not that they agree with it, but they're kind of like, oh, well, like that's what she says, in character anyway, that's what people say on the show, like, we're not calling her ugly, but I don't know if I exactly agree with what she says in being the most beautiful woman in all of WWE. Jerry kind of taking a shot at her looks was weird, just because of the reaction, if only because of the reaction from Jackie and Matt, in that there was no reaction at all. They kind of had this like awkward look on both of their faces. They didn't laugh. They didn't awkwardly laugh or agree or whatever. They were just kind of like, oh. Like, Jerry makes this joke, and it was the first time that he's joked about anything on this show, and they didn't react at all. It was weird. But the Matt Camp references their team bad history. They have good chemistry. They've always been kind of on and off linked throughout the years in WWE. Jerry Lawler makes a puppy joke. So this was what I was laughing about earlier. I was thinking, oh God, here we go. It wasn't the fact that he said puppies or puppy or whatever. That was stupid. What made me laugh, though, was the fact that he goes back to the Sasha and Naomi thing, because they had Sasha's dog in the shot when they were interviewed, Ryu Maivia, whatever the fuck she calls her dog. So Jerry's like, oh yeah, I forgot to say that they had a puppy with them. And, Matt Camp cracks up, and I guess Jackie does too, and she references, oh yeah, everyone loves dogs. And then Matt's like, yeah, that's not exactly what he was talking about. What was funny about it was not the fact that he said puppy or whatever. It was the fact that that he said that and made the reference to what he used to say on commentary 20 years ago. And Jackie had no idea what he was talking about. Tell me you haven't watched the Attitude Era without telling me you haven't watched the Attitude Era. She is a big WWE fan. She's clearly watched the product. But for her not to know the Jerry Lawler puppy reference, it's probably better that she doesn't, because it was always stupid, and I don't know if it was misogynistic or sexist, but thank God they don't do that shit today, obviously. But the fact that she didn't even get the joke or get the reference, it was funny enough to me where it's like, I mean, how long have you been watching the product where you don't know that Jerry has made these puppy jokes for years? As disgusting as they are, it was funny that she didn't even know what it was. Anyway, moving on. So they talk about the Ronda Rousey Sonia match, and Jerry Lawler says that she started slow, but then got things going in the match with Sonia before putting her away. And Camp calls it a tune-up match for her, essentially, going into WrestleMania before she faces Charlotte for the SmackDown Women's Championship. They all agree that Ronda's the favorite going into that match at Mania. Before closing it out, and after sending Jerry Lawler home and hanging up on him on Zoom, Jackie and Matt plug one last time the WWE Championship defense. They really wanted people to go to that show last night in Madison Square Garden, emphasizing he's going to have a mystery opponent. It's going to be a mystery opponent. It's irrelevant now because I'm putting this video up after the fact, but it was interesting that they were really hammering it home here and on SmackDown and on Raw coming out of Elimination Chamber. I mean, I said this in my SmackDown review yesterday, but I was at the last MSG show that WWE did the day after Christmas, and I'd been to that one once before, 5 years earlier. This most recent one was the worst attended MSG show I've ever seen. One of the worst attended WWE shows I've seen, period. And it was in the fucking Garden. I mean, there were a handful of people there, more than a handful, but it was not as many as you would think for a post-Christmas show at MSG. And it was a good show, and I enjoyed it. And a lot of the people couldn't show up due to COVID, and the Omicron variant was going around at that point, so who knows, but hopefully the attendance was better last night. I wasn't there, so I'm not exactly sure, and I'm recording this beforehand, so I don't know. But it's interesting. They're really hammering home this Brock Lesnar Mystery Championship defense if they're not going to be streaming the show on Peacock. I guess they took footage of it, but it's not like it's going to be a streaming show, or it wasn't a streaming show last night on Peacock or on the network or on their YouTube channel or whatever. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the March 5th, 2022 edition of Talking Smack. Thank you guys for checking out my review of the show. Decent show this week. Jerry Lawler wasn't completely unbearable, so that's good. The Ricochet interview is notable as the new Intercontinental Champion. We got to hear from Sasha Banks and Naomi and see Sasha's dog, which was cool, as a dog fan myself. And we also heard very briefly from the SmackDown Tag Team Champions, the Usos. So they got the star power this week. Decent show. Not much more than that. Be sure to like this video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. We'll be back either tomorrow or on Tuesday with more videos. So be sure to hit the bell button every time a new video is uploaded here to the channel. Have a great one, guys. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.